I'm Kate Nicole, 29, an internationally acclaimed fashion photographer. My work has graced the covers of Vogue and Harper's Bazaar, but behind the camera is a woman who turned childhood rejection into artistic vision, someone who finds beauty in the broken and overlooked. The champagne flute trembled against my lips as I watched my sister Emma glide across the marble floor in her $1,000 wedding dress, completely unaware that the woman she'd called the family mistake for 18 years was standing 20 feet away. The crystal chandeliers cast dancing shadows across her perfect face, the same face that had made mine look like a cruel joke at every family gathering, every school event, every moment that mattered. I shouldn't have come. The scent of white roses and expensive perfume filled the ballroom, but underneath it all, I caught something else, the faint smell of my mother's signature lavender soap. She was here somewhere in this sea of designer gowns and tailored suits, probably telling anyone who'd listen about her beautiful daughter's perfect wedding, while conveniently forgetting she had another daughter at all. My fingers tightened around my camera bag. Old habits. Even now, 11 years after they'd thrown me out like yesterday's garbage, I still reached for my camera when the world felt too sharp, too real. Through a lens, everything became manageable. Distant. Safe. Excuse me, miss? I turned to find a server offering me another glass of champagne, his young face kind and curious. You look like you've seen a ghost. If only he knew. Something like that, I murmured, accepting the drink I didn't want. The orchestra began playing something classical and romantic, and I watched Emma take her new husband's hand for their first dance. James Morrison, tech mogul, Harvard graduate, the kind of man my parents had always dreamed their daughter would marry. He spun Emma gracefully, his eyes never leaving her face, completely devoted. I wondered if he knew about the sister, who'd been erased from family photos. The daughter, who'd been told she was too difficult, too strange, too much of an embarrassment to bring to family functions. The girl who'd packed her bags at 17 with nothing but a broken camera and a heart full of rage. The music swelled, and suddenly I was 17 again, standing in our childhood bedroom while Emma sat on her perfectly made bed, watching me stuff my few belongings into a duffel bag. You know this is for the best, Kate, she'd said, not even looking up from painting her nails. You never fit in anyway. The memory hit like a physical blow, and I had to grip the marble pillar beside me to stay upright. The cool stone anchored me, brought me back to the present, to this moment I'd been both dreading and craving for over a decade. A burst of laughter from the dance floor made me look up. Emma was giggling at something James had whispered in her ear, her face radiant with joy. She looked exactly like the princess she'd always believed herself to be, surrounded by everyone who mattered, everyone who loved her, everyone except the sister she'd helped destroy. I was about to turn and leave. This had been a mistake, a moment of weakness, when James's eyes found mine across the crowded room. For a heartbeat, we simply stared at each other. Then his brow furrowed, and I saw the exact moment recognition flickered across his features. He knew my face. But how? Before I go further, tell me in the comments where you're watching from, and if you're hooked already, a like and subscribe will keep these stories coming. James whispered something to Emma, never breaking eye contact with me. She followed his gaze, and when her eyes landed on mine, every drop of color drained from her face. The smile died on her lips. Her hand flew to her throat like she couldn't breathe. For 11 years, I'd imagined this moment. I'd pictured myself walking into her perfect life like an avenging angel, ready to expose every lie, every cruelty, every moment she'd stood by while our parents tore me apart. I dreamed of watching her world crumble the way mine had. But standing here now, seeing the genuine terror in her eyes, I felt something I hadn't expected. Satisfaction. The music continued, but Emma had stopped dancing. James was trying to guide her through the steps, but she was frozen, staring at me like I was death itself walking through her wedding reception. Other guests began to notice. Whispers started rippling through the crowd like stones thrown into still water. I could feel eyes turning toward me, could hear the subtle shift in conversation as people tried to figure out who I was and why the bride looked like she'd seen a ghost. My mother's voice cut through the murmur, sharp and panicked. Security. Where is security? That's when I smiled. Not the practiced, professional smile I'd perfected for client meetings and gallery openings. This was something else entirely. Something that had been building for 11 years of silence, 11 years of pretending I didn't exist, 11 years of letting them believe they'd won. I took a step forward, then another. The crowd parted like the Red Sea, everyone sensing the electricity in the air, the promise of drama at what should have been a perfect celebration. James finally stopped trying to dance and walked toward me, his face a mask of confusion and growing concern. Emma followed a few steps behind, her wedding dress rustling like autumn leaves. "Do you know her?" James asked Emma, his voice carrying in the sudden quiet. Emma's mouth opened and closed like a fish gasping for air. She couldn't speak, couldn't move, couldn't do anything but stare at the sister she'd helped erase. I looked at James, this man who'd married into my family without knowing its darkest secret, and felt the words rise up from somewhere deep and dangerous. "More than you'll ever imagine," I said, my voice steady and clear in the crystalline silence. And then I reached into my camera bag and pulled out the envelope I'd been carrying for 3 months, ever since I'd learned about this wedding. The envelope that contained photographs James had never seen. Photographs that would change everything. The envelope that would finally give me the revenge I'd been waiting 11 years to claim. But as I held it up, as I saw the absolute terror in Emma's eyes and the growing confusion in James's, I heard footsteps behind me. Heavy, purposeful, moving fast. I turned just in time to see my father charging toward me, his face twisted with rage, his hand already raised to strike. Time slowed to a crawl as my father's hand cut through the air toward my face. The same hand that had pointed toward the door 11 years ago, the same voice that had called me, a disappointment to the family name. But I wasn't 17 anymore. I wasn't powerless. I caught his wrist mid-swing. The crack of bone meeting bone echoed through the silent ballroom like a gunshot. Gasps rippled through the crowd as I held his arms suspended between us, my grip iron steady from years of hauling camera equipment across continents. "Hello, Dad," I said quietly, my voice carrying in the absolute silence. "Miss me?" His face went purple with rage and shock. He'd expected the same cowering girl he'd thrown out. Instead, he found a woman who'd learned to fight back in boardrooms and galleries, who'd stared down war correspondents and fashion moguls without flinching. "You have no right to be here," he hissed, trying to wrench his arm free. "This is a private event." Private. I released his wrist and stepped back, letting my voice carry to every corner of the room. How private can it be when half of Manhattan's elite are here? When the society pages will be covering every detail tomorrow? I could see my mother pushing through the crowd now, her face a mask of barely controlled panic. She looked exactly the same, perfectly coiffed, perfectly dressed, perfectly cold. The woman who'd stood by while her husband called me the ugly daughter and never said a word in my defense. "Kate." Her voice was barely a whisper, but it carried the weight of 11 years of silence. "What are you doing here?" "I was invited," I lied smoothly, pulling out my phone and showing them the wedding announcement I'd found online. It said, "Celebrating the union of Emma Morrison and James Morrison." Funny thing about public announcements, they're public. James stepped forward, his confusion evident. "I'm sorry, but who exactly are you?" The question hung in the air like a blade. Emma made a small, wounded sound, and I saw her grab James's arm, her knuckles white against his dark suit. "Don't," she whispered. "Please, Kate. Don't do this here." "Do what?" I asked innocently, though my heart was hammering against my ribs. "Introduce myself to my new brother-in-law? Tell him about the family he's marrying into." "You're not family," my father spat. "You gave up that right when I what?" I cut him off, my voice rising. "When I refused to pretend I was grateful for being treated like a mistake. When I wouldn't apologize for existing." The crowd was pressing closer now, sensing blood in the water. I could see phones being raised, cameras clicking. Tomorrow's society pages were about to get very interesting. James looked between Emma and me, his face growing pale as understanding began to dawn. "Emma, is this your sister?" The word sister hit Emma like a physical blow. She swayed on her feet, and for a moment, I thought she might faint. Part of me, the part that remembered sharing a bedroom, sharing secrets, sharing dreams before everything went wrong, wanted to catch her. But the larger part, the part that had been forged in 11 years of exile, stayed perfectly still. "Answer him," I said softly. "Tell your husband about your sister." "She's not," my mother started, but I cut her off with a look that could have frozen fire. "I'm Kate Nicole," I said, turning to address James directly. "Emma's older sister. The one they don't talk about. The one they pretended died when I was 17. James's face went white. "That's impossible. Emma told me she was an only child." The words hit the ballroom like a bomb. Conversations stopped mid-sentence. Even the orchestra had fallen silent, their instruments hanging forgotten in their hands. Emma's sob was barely audible, but in the crystalline quiet, it might as well have been a scream. 11 years, I continued, my voice steady despite the earthquake happening in my chest. 11 years of family photos without me. 11 years of Christmas cards signed, the Morrison family of 3. 11 years of pretending I never existed. "You brought this on yourself," my father said, but his voice lacked its earlier conviction. He could feel the crowd turning, could sense the shift in the room's energy. "Did I?" I pulled out my phone and swiped to a photo, one of dozens I'd taken of their family social media over the years. This was posted last Christmas. Our beautiful family. "Notice anyone missing?" I held up the phone so James could see. His face crumpled as he looked at the image. My parents and Emma gathered around a Christmas tree, all smiles and perfect family bliss. "Emma," he said quietly, his voice breaking, "you told me your parents only had one child. You said." "I had two," Emma whispered, tears streaming down her face, ruining her perfect makeup. "You don't understand. She was always so difficult, so angry. She made everything complicated." Complicated? The word came out sharper than I'd intended. "I was 17 years old, Emma. I was your sister." "You were jealous," she shot back, some of her old fire returning. "You couldn't stand that I was prettier, more popular, that boys actually wanted to date me." "Stop." James's voice cut through her words like a blade. "Just stop." He was staring at Emma like he'd never seen her before, and I realized with a jolt of surprise that this wasn't going the way I'd planned. I'd expected him to side with his wife, to dismiss me as a troublemaker. Instead, he looked horrified. "You lied to me," he said quietly. "For 2 years. You lied to me about having a sister." "James, please. What else have you lied about?" His voice was getting louder now, and I could see the exact moment his trust shattered. "What else don't I know about the woman I just married?" This was it. This was the moment I'd been waiting for. Emma's perfect life was crumbling, just like mine had 11 years ago. I should have felt triumphant. Instead, I felt hollow. "James," I said quietly, and he turned to look at me with eyes full of pain and confusion. "There's something else you need to know." I reached into my camera bag and pulled out the envelope I'd been carrying. The one that contained the photographs that would finish what I'd started. But as I held it up, as I saw the absolute devastation on Emma's face, I heard something that made my blood freeze. A slow clap. Someone was applauding. I turned toward the sound and felt the world tilt sideways. Standing at the edge of the crowd, wearing an expensive suit and a smile that made my skin crawl, was Marcus Chen, my ex-fiancé. The man who destroyed my life 3 years ago. The man who'd stolen my work, my reputation, and my heart before disappearing into the night. The man who was supposed to be in prison. "Bravo, Kate," he said, his voice carrying across the silent ballroom. "Absolutely magnificent. Though I have to say, you're not the only one with secrets tonight." He started walking toward us, and with each step, I felt my carefully constructed revenge plan crumbling around me. "You see, James," Marcus continued, his eyes never leaving mine, "your new sister-in-law isn't quite the victim she's pretending to be. Are you, Kate?" The envelope slipped from my numb fingers and hit the marble floor with a sound like thunder. The envelope scattered its contents across the marble floor like fallen leaves, and I watched in horror as my carefully guarded secrets spilled out for everyone to see. Photographs.
Dozens of them.
But not the ones I'd planned to show James. These were different. These were mine. Marcus bent down and picked up one of the images, a black and white portrait of a young woman, her face turned away from the camera, tears visible on her cheek. My work. My art. The photographs that had launched my career and that he'd stolen from me 3 years ago. "Ladies and gentlemen," Marcus announced, holding up the photograph like a trophy. "Meet Kate Nicole, internationally acclaimed photographer." Though I suppose acclaimed is a relative term when your entire reputation is built on stolen work. The words hit me like ice water. Around us, the crowd pressed closer, phones raised, recording every moment of my destruction. This wasn't how it was supposed to go. I was supposed to be the one revealing secrets, not having mine exposed. "That's not true," I said, but my voice came out weak, uncertain. "Isn't it?" Marcus pulled out his own phone and swiped to a series of images. "These are the original files, Kate. Time-stamped 3 years before your breakthrough exhibition. Funny how they're all saved under my name." James was staring at the scattered photographs, then at me, his face a mask of confusion and growing disgust. "You're a fraud?" "No," I said desperately, but even as the word left my lips, I could see doubt creeping into every face around me. "Marcus, tell them the truth. Tell them what you did." Marcus laughed, the sound sharp and cruel. "What I did? Kate, darling, I gave you everything. A career, a reputation, a life you never could have built on your own. And how did you repay me? By trying to destroy me when I asked for what was rightfully mine. You stole my work." The words exploded out of me, raw and desperate. "You took my photographs and claimed them as your own." "I improved them," Marcus corrected smoothly. "I gave them context, meaning, commercial value. Without me, they would have remained the amateur snapshots of a bitter, talentless girl with daddy issues." The crowd murmured, and I could feel the tide turning against me. My father was smiling now, vindicated. My mother looked relieved, as if Marcus had just confirmed everything she'd always believed about me. But Emma was staring at the scattered photographs with something that looked almost like recognition. "These are beautiful," she said quietly, picking up one of the images. It was a portrait of an elderly woman, her hands weathered and worn, her eyes full of stories. "I remember this one. You took it of Mrs. Henderson next door, when we were teenagers." "Emma, don't," my mother started, but Emma wasn't listening. "You were always taking pictures," Emma continued, her voice growing stronger. "Even when we were kids. You saw things differently than everyone else. You made ordinary things look—" She paused, searching for the word. "Magical." Marcus's smile faltered slightly. "Emma, isn't it? Your sister has filled your head with romantic notions about her art. The truth is—" "The truth," interrupted a new voice, "is that Marcus Chun is a convicted felon who should be in federal prison right now." Everyone turned toward the ballroom entrance, where a woman in a sharp business suit was walking toward us with purposeful strides. She was flanked by 2 men in dark suits who had the unmistakable bearing of federal agents. "Agent Sarah Martinez, FBI," the woman announced, pulling out her badge. "Mr. Chin, you're under arrest for violation of your parole terms." Marcus's face went white. "This is impossible. My parole officer was informed the moment you left the state." Agent Martinez cut him off. "Did you really think we wouldn't be monitoring your movements? Especially after what you did to Ms. Nicole here." The ballroom erupted in whispers and gasps. I felt like I was drowning, like the world was spinning too fast for me to catch up. "Agent Martinez," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. "What's happening?" She turned to me with something that might have been sympathy. 3 years ago, you filed a complaint against Mr. Chen for theft of intellectual property. The case was buried due to lack of evidence and his connections in the art world. But 6 months ago, we found his storage unit Thousands of stolen photographs, forged documents, falsified provenance records. Your work was just the tip of the iceberg. Marcus was backing away now, but the agents moved to flank him. You can't prove anything, he said desperately. Those photographs could belong to anyone. Actually, Agent Martinez said, pulling out a tablet, we can. Digital forensics have come a long way in 3 years. Every image has a unique signature, like a fingerprint. We've traced over 200 stolen works back to their original creators. Kate's photographs were among the first we identified. I felt my knees go weak. You mean she's been telling the truth this whole time? James said quietly. He was looking at me with new eyes, and I could see the pieces clicking into place in his mind. The family that threw out their own daughter. The man who stole her life's work. The sister who... He turned to Emma. The sister who let it all happen. Emma was crying now, ugly sobs that shook her whole body. I didn't know, she whispered. About Marcus, about the stolen work. I thought she was just making excuses, trying to blame everyone else for her problems. But you knew about the rest, I said, my voice steady now despite the chaos around us. You knew what they did to me. You were there. I was 18, Emma said desperately. I was scared. I didn't know how to stand up to them. You were my sister, I replied simply. That should have been enough. The agents were handcuffing Marcus now, reading him his rights. The crowd was recording everything, their phones capturing every moment of the drama. Tomorrow, this would be all over social media, the society pages, the art world news. But for the first time in 11 years, I didn't care about the cameras. Kate, my father said, his voice uncertain now. Perhaps we should talk privately.
No.
The word came out firm and final. We had 11 years to talk. You chose silence. I bent down and began gathering my scattered photographs, my real work, the images that told the story of who I really was. Emma knelt beside me, helping to collect them. This one, she said softly, holding up a portrait of a young girl with sad eyes. This is you, isn't it? You took this in the mirror in our old bedroom. I looked at the image, a self-portrait I'd taken the night before I left home, trying to capture what it felt like to be invisible in your own family. Yes. You were never ugly, Emma whispered. I was jealous. You saw the world so differently. You made art out of pain. I could never do that. You could have tried understanding instead of competing, I said, but there was less anger in my voice now. More sadness than rage. James was watching us, his face thoughtful. Emma, he said quietly, we need to talk. About a lot of things. Emma nodded, tears still streaming down her face. I know we do. As the agents led Marcus away, he turned back to look at me one last time. This isn't over, Kate, he called out. You think you've won, but... Actually, Agent Martinez interrupted. It is over. Mr. Chin will be facing federal charges for art fraud, money laundering, and violation of parole. He's looking at 15 to 20 years. The ballroom was slowly emptying now, guests filtering out in small groups, whispering among themselves about the drama they'd witnessed. The perfect wedding had become something else entirely, a reckoning, a revelation, a family's secrets laid bare under crystal chandeliers. My parents stood together near the dance floor, looking lost and uncertain. For the first time in my memory, they seemed small, diminished. The power they'd held over me for so long had evaporated in the space of an hour. Kate, my mother said hesitantly. Would you be willing to? To what? I asked. Pretend the last 11 years didn't happen? Go back to being the family disappointment. To start over, she said quietly. To try to be a family again. I looked at her, this woman who'd given birth to me but never really seen me, and felt something shift inside my chest. Not forgiveness, that would take time if it came at all. But maybe the beginning of something else. Understanding, perhaps. Or at least the possibility of it. I don't know, I said honestly. I'm not the same person you threw away. I won't be. We know, my father said, his voice rough. We made mistakes. Terrible mistakes. Yes, I agreed. You did. Emma stood up, my photographs clutched in her hands. Kate, I know I don't deserve it, but could we try? Could we try to be sisters again? I looked at her, really looked at her, for the first time in 11 years. She was still beautiful, still the golden daughter our parents had always favored. But there were lines around her eyes now, a sadness that hadn't been there before. Life had touched her too, marked her in ways that weren't visible in family photos. I don't know how to be your sister anymore, I said. I'm not sure I ever really knew how. Maybe we could learn together, she said hopefully. Maybe we could figure it out. James stepped forward, his face serious. Emma, before we talk about anything else, I need to know. Are there any other secrets? Any other lies? Emma looked at him, then at me, then at our parents. No, she said finally. No more secrets. No more lies. Then maybe, I said slowly, we could try. It wasn't forgiveness. It wasn't a happy ending tied up with a bow. It was just a possibility, fragile and uncertain, like the first green shoots pushing through winter soil. But sometimes possibilities are enough. As I walked out of the ballroom, my photographs safely tucked away in my camera bag, I felt something I hadn't experienced in 11 years. Not happiness exactly, not peace, but something close to hope. Behind me, I could hear Emma explaining everything to James, her voice breaking as she told him about the sister they'd erased, the family that had chosen perfection over truth. I could hear my parents talking quietly, their voices heavy with regret. And for the first time since I was 17 years old, I thought maybe, just maybe, I might have a family again. Not the family I'd lost. That was gone forever, buried under years of silence and pain. But perhaps something new, something honest, something real. The rain had started while we were inside, and as I stepped out into the New York night, I tilted my face up to the sky and let it wash over me. Tomorrow, I would have to deal with the media attention, the questions, the aftermath of everything that had happened tonight. But tonight I was free. Free from Marcus's lies. Free from my family's shame. Free from the weight of secrets I'd carried for too long. I pulled out my camera and took one last photograph. The rain-slicked street, the golden light spilling from the ballroom windows, the city that had become my home when my family had cast me out. It was beautiful. It was real. It was mine. And for the first time in 11 years, that was enough.